In the fog-shrouded village of Ashbourne in 1840, a widow named Eleanor Ashford, aged 32, lives in the shadow of her late husband's memory. 2 years ago, consumption claimed Thomas Ashford, leaving Eleanor with nothing but grief and a small cottage on the edge of the moorlands. Her only companion is her younger sister Catherine, a spirited 24-year-old who moved in after Thomas's death to keep Eleanor from drowning in sorrow. The sisters survive on Eleanor's meager earnings from sewing and Catherine's work at the village bookshop. Their bond strengthened by shared loss. Catherine, too, had loved someone once, a sailor who never returned from the sea. When a mysterious illness begins claiming lives in Ashbourne, the villagers whisper of an ancient curse, of a creature that walks between darkness and dawn. Eleanor dismisses these tales as superstition, until the night Catherine collapses with the same pallor that preceded the other deaths, skin like porcelain, lips drained of color, and a peculiar mark on her throat. Desperate and helpless, Eleanor ventures into the forbidden woods, where locals claim the creature dwells, prepared to offer her own life in exchange for her sister's survival. What she finds is not a monster, but a man named Nathaniel Crane, a vampire who has walked the earth for 3 centuries, cursed to live in eternal loneliness after losing his own beloved to the very transformation he underwent. Nathaniel reveals a truth that shatters Eleanor's understanding. Catherine is not merely ill, but in the process of a slow transformation, infected by another vampire who feeds without mercy. There is only one way to save her. Someone must willingly give their life force to reverse the transformation before it completes at the next full moon, 3 nights away. Eleanor's plea, "Save her instead of me," awakens something long dormant in Nathaniel's ancient heart. But when he arrives at the cottage and sees both sisters, one dying, one willing to die, he makes a choice that no one anticipates. He takes them both, not to kill, but to transport them to his manor hidden deep within the woods, where he will attempt something he has never done before: save both their lives through a ritual that might cost him the immortality he has grown to despise. What unfolds is a story of sacrifice, unexpected love, and the devastating price of choosing between death and an eternity of loneliness. Eleanor Ashford's fingers had long since gone numb from the cold, but she continued pushing the needle through the thick fabric of Mrs. Whitmore's winter coat, each stitch precise despite the trembling in her hands. The single candle on her work table created more shadows than light in the small cottage, and outside, November rain hammered against the windows like impatient fingers demanding entry. She had been sewing since dawn, and now, as the church bells struck 9 in the evening, her eyes burned with exhaustion. But she could not stop. The coal merchant would come tomorrow, and she was still 3 shillings short of what she owed. "You'll go blind working in this darkness," Catherine said from the doorway, her voice carrying that particular lilt of concern she had adopted since moving in. She held a cup of weak tea, the steam rising in delicate spirals. "Eleanor, please, just for tonight, rest." Eleanor looked up at her sister and felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she truly saw Catherine. The way her auburn hair caught even the faintest light, how her green eyes sparkled with a vitality that Eleanor felt she herself had lost the day they lowered Thomas into the ground. Catherine was everything beautiful about youth and hope, and Eleanor was terrified of failing her the way she felt she had failed her husband, unable to save him as consumption devoured him from within over those horrible 6 months. "I'm nearly finished," Eleanor lied, though at least a dozen repairs remained in the basket beside her. "Go to bed, darling. You have to open the bookshop at dawn." Catherine set the tea down and moved behind Eleanor's chair, placing her hands on her older sister's shoulders. "Do you remember what Thomas used to say? That you carried the weight of the world on these shoulders, and someone needed to remind you to set it down occasionally." Her fingers kneaded the knotted muscles. "He would not want this for you, Eleanor. This half-life you're living," Eleanor's throat constricted. 2 years, and still the mention of Thomas's name could undo her. "He is not here to want anything anymore," she said more sharply than she intended. She felt Catherine's hand still, then withdraw. Immediately Eleanor regretted her tone. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired. We both are," Catherine said quietly, but she did not return to her room. Instead, she pulled up the wooden stool that Thomas had crafted years ago and sat beside Eleanor, studying her face in the candlelight. "Mrs. Fletcher came into the shop today. She was telling me the most peculiar thing." Eleanor resumed her sewing, grateful for the change in subject. "Mrs. Fletcher considers it peculiar when her cat looks at her strangely." "What was it this time?" "The Dawson girl died last night." The needle slipped, pricking Eleanor's finger. A drop of blood welled up, dark and perfect. She watched it for a moment before pressing her thumb to it. "Mary Dawson?" "But she was barely 17, 18 last month," Catherine corrected, her voice dropping lower. "Mrs. Fletcher says it was the same as the others. Went to bed perfectly healthy, and by morning she was cold as stone. No fever, no cough, nothing, just drained." She paused, and Eleanor could feel her sister's eyes searching her face. "That makes 5 in 3 weeks, Eleanor." 5 healthy people just gone. Eleanor tied off her thread with more force than necessary. "People die, Catherine. It's the way of things. Perhaps there's some illness that Dr. Morrison hasn't identified yet." "Dr. Morrison is calling it impossible," Catherine interrupted. "He says he's never seen anything like it. And you know what the villagers are saying. The villagers say many foolish things. They say it's a vampire." The word hung in the air between them like smoke, dark and curling. Eleanor set down her sewing and finally met her sister's gaze. In Catherine's eyes she saw not fear exactly, but something close to it, a wariness that had not been there a month ago. "You cannot possibly believe such nonsense." "I don't know what I believe anymore," Catherine admitted, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warmth from the fireplace. "But I know that 5 people are dead, that each of them had strange marks on their throats, and that every death has occurred within a mile of the old Haverford estate in the woods. The place everyone says has been abandoned for 100 years. Eleanor had heard the stories, of course. Every child in Ashbourne grew up with tales of the Haverford estate, of the family that had lived there generations ago before vanishing overnight, leaving behind a manor that locals claimed was cursed. She had never ventured near it. The woods were deep and treacherous, and she had no reason to go, but she had seen it once from a distance, a dark silhouette against the sky like a tombstone. "Correlation is not causation," Eleanor said, echoing something Thomas used to tell her when she worried about omens and superstitions. "Just because the deaths happened near the woods does not mean—" "The Dawson girl was found with blood on her pillow," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Dr. Morrison says she didn't have a drop left in her body." "Where did it go, Eleanor? Where did all of it go?" Eleanor had no answer for that. She reached out and took Catherine's hand, finding it ice cold despite the fire. "Whatever is happening, we will be careful. We will lock the doors and windows. We will not go out after dark. We will be safe." Catherine squeezed her hand in return, and for a moment they sat in silence. 2 sisters alone in a cottage on the edge of a village that suddenly felt far more dangerous than it had just hours before. "Then," Catherine smiled, though it did not reach her eyes, "listen to us, frightening ourselves like children. You're right, of course. We're perfectly safe here. But that night, as Eleanor finally climbed into bed long after midnight, she found herself staring at the window, at the darkness pressing against the glass, and wondering if safety was something any of them truly had anymore. The wind had picked up, howling through the eaves, and in that howl, she could almost hear words, ancient, hungry, patient words that made her pull the blankets tighter and wish, not for the first time, that Thomas was still beside her. His presence a bulwark against the terrors that darkness always brought. She did not know that 3 rooms away, Catherine lay in her own bed, feeling a strange coldness spreading through her limbs. A coldness that had nothing to do with November's chill and everything to do with the shadow that had passed across her window earlier that evening. The shadow she had told no one about because she had convinced herself it was merely a trick of the lamplight. She did not know that on her sister's throat, just below the collar of her nightgown, two small marks were beginning to form, red and angry and precise, and neither of them knew that in the depths of the forbidden woods, in a manner that was not abandoned at all, a man who was not quite a man stood at his own window, looking in the direction of their cottage, his ancient heart heavy with knowledge of what was coming. Nathaniel Crane had lived for 300 years, and in all that time, he had learned one immutable truth. Death came for everyone eventually, in one form or another, and all the pleading in the world could not stop it. But sometimes, rarely, death could be bargained with. Sometimes it could be delayed, and sometimes, if one was willing to pay the price, it could even be cheated. He turned away from the window and moved through his manor, through halls lined with paintings of people long dead, through rooms filled with furniture covered in dust sheets, through a life that had become nothing more than existence. He had not fed in months, surviving on animal blood that sustained his body but left his soul as empty as the rooms around him. He had stopped caring about mortality, about humanity, about anything at all. But tonight something had shifted. Tonight he had felt it, that pull, that connection, that sense of destiny that he had not experienced since the night he lost Margaret 3 centuries ago. Someone was coming, someone desperate enough to find him. And when they did, when they stood before him and made their plea, he would have to decide whether the monster he had become was capable of remembering what it meant to be human, to care, to sacrifice, to love. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him, and as he sank into his chair before the cold fireplace, Nathaniel Crane did something he had not done in over a century. He hoped. The next morning arrived with deceptive beauty, the sun breaking through the clouds to paint Ashbourne in shades of gold and amber. Eleanor woke later than usual, her body aching from the previous night's work, and stumbled downstairs to find the kitchen cold and empty. No fire in the stove, no kettle on to boil, no Catherine humming as she prepared their meager breakfast. The first thread of worry pulled tight in Eleanor's chest. "Catherine," she called, moving toward her sister's room. The door stood ajar, and when she pushed it open, her heart stopped. Catherine lay in bed, her skin so pale it seemed translucent, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like spilled blood. But it was her lips that made Eleanor's breath catch, blue, like she had been submerged in icy water. Eleanor flew to her sister's side, grabbing her hand. It was cold, so terribly cold, but there was a pulse, faint and irregular. "Catherine! Catherine, wake up!" She shook her sister gently, then more firmly, panic rising like bile in her throat. Catherine's eyelids fluttered but did not open. Her breathing was shallow, barely perceptible. "No, no, no," Eleanor whispered, pressing her hand to Catherine's forehead. "No fever, no sign of illness at all except this terrible, unnatural pallor." She ran for water, for blankets, piling them on her sister while chafing her hands, trying to bring warmth back into them. "Stay with me, darling. Please, stay with me." When Catherine's eyes finally opened an hour later, they seemed unfocused, looking through Eleanor rather than at her. "So cold," she whispered, her voice thin and distant. "Eleanor, why is it so cold?" "I'm going to fetch Dr. Morrison," Eleanor said, already moving toward the door. But Catherine's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping her wrist. "No," Catherine said, and there was fear in her eyes now, real and raw. "No doctors. They couldn't help the others. They can't help me. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." Eleanor's voice cracked. "This is just a chill, just a look at my throat," Catherine interrupted, and slowly, with trembling fingers, she pulled down the collar of her nightgown. Eleanor looked, and the world tilted. 2 marks, perfectly symmetrical, like the puncture wounds from snake fangs, but deeper, more deliberate. The skin around them had darkened to purple-black, and from each mark, thin red lines spread like spider webs beneath Catherine's pale skin, tracing up her neck toward her jaw. "When?" Eleanor breathed, unable to form more words than that. "Last night. I woke to find something at my window. I thought I was dreaming." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "But this morning, this was here, and I feel like I'm disappearing, Eleanor." like something is drinking me from the inside, and soon there will be nothing left. Eleanor's mind raced through everything she knew, everything she had dismissed as superstition and foolishness. The deaths, the marks, the drained bodies, and now Catherine, her beautiful, vital Catherine, lying in bed looking like a corpse already. Rage and terror warred in her chest, but beneath both was a determination sharp as any blade. "Then I will find what did this," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "And I will make it undo this, or I will die trying." Catherine's grip tightened on her wrist. "Eleanor, you cannot. If the stories are true, if this truly is "I don't care what it is," Eleanor interrupted fiercely. "You are all I have left in this world, Catherine. You are my sister, my family, my heart. I will not lose you the way I lost Thomas. I will not sit by your bed and watch you fade. I will not bury another person I love." She leaned down, pressing her forehead to Catherine's. "I will save you. I swear it on everything I am." And so, as the sun climbed higher and Ashbourne began its daily routines, ignorant of the tragedy unfolding in the cottage on the moor, Eleanor Ashford made her preparations. She dressed in her sturdiest clothes, laced her walking boots, and packed a satchel with what little she thought might help: a knife from the kitchen, a cross that had belonged to her mother, matches, a flask of water. She left Catherine sleeping fitfully, piling every blanket they owned over her, banking the fire high, leaving a note that said simply, "I will return. I promise." Then Eleanor Ashford, widow, seamstress, 32 years of age and terrified beyond measure, walked out of her cottage and turned toward the woods, toward the forbidden estate, toward the creature that had taken her sister's life, even while her heart still beat. She did not know if she would find death there or salvation, or something worse than either. But she knew with absolute certainty that she would offer anything, pay any price, make any bargain, even if that bargain was her own life for Catherine's. The woods swallowed her within minutes, the ancient trees closing overhead like a cathedral ceiling. And as Eleanor walked deeper into the darkness, she did not look back. She could not afford to. Behind her was everything she had already lost. Ahead was everything she still had left to lose. And somewhere in between, in a manner that waited like a patient predator, was a vampire named Nathaniel Crane, who did not yet know that his 3 centuries of isolation were about to end in the most unexpected way possible. The story had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The woods were older than Ashbourne itself, dense with oak and ash trees, whose roots twisted through the earth like arthritic fingers. Eleanor had ventured perhaps a quarter-mile in when she realized that the bird-song had stopped. The silence pressed against her ears, thick and unnatural, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves beneath her boots and her own quickening breath. The temperature had dropped despite the morning sun, and mist clung to the ground in defiance of the season. Swirling around her ankles as though trying to hold her back, she pushed forward, guided by instinct more than direction, for there were no paths here, no markers to indicate that anyone had walked this way in decades. Branches caught at her cloak and hair, and twice she stumbled over hidden roots, barely catching herself. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear warring with determination. But each time doubt whispered that she should turn back. She thought of Catherine's pale face, those terrible marks on her throat, and she kept walking. After what felt like hours, but could have been only one, Eleanor saw it. The Haverford Manor rose from the mist like a ship emerging from fog, its dark stone facade streaked with moss and age. It was larger than she had imagined. 3 stories of Gothic architecture with tall windows that reflected nothing, not even the weak sunlight filtering through the trees. Gargoyles perched along the roofline, their faces worn smooth by centuries of rain, and the iron gate that marked the entrance hung askew on broken hinges, creaking softly in a wind Eleanor could not feel. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced her feet forward through the gate, across an overgrown garden where stone statues stood like silent witnesses, their features obscured by creeping ivy. The front door was massive, carved with symbols Eleanor did not recognize, and when she reached for the iron knocker, shaped like a lion's head, her hand trembled so violently she nearly could not grasp it. 3 times she knocked, each strike echoing into the depths of the house like a heartbeat. Then silence. Eleanor waited, counting her breaths, wondering if perhaps the house truly was abandoned, if all the stories were just that. Stories meant to frighten children and explain the inexplicable. She was about to knock again when the door swung inward without sound, revealing darkness so complete it seemed solid. "Hello!" Eleanor's voice sounded small and fragile. "I seek. I need—" She swallowed hard, squared her shoulders, and spoke with more strength. "I need to speak with whoever dwells here. My sister is dying, and I believe you can help her." No response came from the darkness, but Eleanor sensed something, a presence watching, evaluating. She took a step forward, crossing the threshold, and immediately the temperature plummeted. Her breath misted before her face, and gooseflesh raced along her arms. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase, walls lined with portraits whose subjects seemed to follow her with their painted eyes, and chandeliers heavy with dust and cobwebs. "You should not have come here." The voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere, deep and resonant, carrying centuries of weariness. "This is not a place for the living." Eleanor spun, searching for the source, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife in her satchel. "Show yourself," she demanded, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I am not afraid." "You should be." The voice was closer now, and Eleanor turned again to find a man standing at the base of the staircase where no one had been a moment before. He was tall and lean, dressed in clothes from another era, dark trousers, a white shirt, a brocade waistcoat that might have been burgundy once, but had faded to the color of old blood. His hair was black as pitch and fell past his shoulders, and his face was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that might have been cruel or kind, and eyes that held her frozen. Those eyes were the most unsettling thing about him, dark as midnight, but with a light moving in their depths, like stars in a void. "You are him," Eleanor breathed. "The vampire." Nathaniel Crane tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as though he could see through her clothes, her skin, into the very marrow of her bones. "I am one of them, yes. Though not the one you seek, I think." He moved closer, his footsteps making no sound on the marble floor. "Tell me, what brings a widow to my door? What desperation drives you into the arms of monsters?" Eleanor's mind raced. How did he know she was a widow? But she pushed the question aside, focusing on what mattered. "My sister, Catherine. Something has infected her. She bears marks on her throat and she is dying, the same way others in the village have died. I came to beg for her life. And what do you offer in exchange?" Nathaniel stopped a few feet away, close enough that Eleanor could see he cast no shadow in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. "Surely you know that monsters do not grant favors from kindness." "My life," Eleanor said without hesitation. "Take my life instead. Drain me dry if you must, but save her. She is young, barely 24, with everything ahead of her. I've already lived. I've already loved and lost. My life has value only in what I can give to save hers." Something flickered across Nathaniel's face, surprise perhaps, or pain. He turned away, moving to one of the tall windows, looking out at the overgrown grounds. "You speak as though death is a simple transaction, as though lives can be weighed and exchanged like coins in a market." His voice had gone quiet, almost sad. "It is not so simple." "Then explain it to me," Eleanor pleaded, moving closer despite her fear. "Tell me what I must do. There must be something, some ritual, some price I can pay. The stories say vampires can be bargained with. The stories are wrong about many things." Nathaniel turned back to her, and in the better light, Eleanor could see the lines around his eyes, the weariness etched into his features. He looked like a man in his mid-30s, but his eyes were ancient, hollow with the weight of centuries. "Your sister was not bitten by me. There is another, one who feeds without restraint, who creates suffering for sport. He is young, barely a century old, and he has none of the control that age brings. He finds humans amusing, their deaths entertaining, horror washed through Eleanor. Where is he? How do I find him? You do not want to find him, Nathaniel said sharply. Marcus would drain you for the pleasure of hearing you scream and leave your sister to complete her transformation into one of us. Is that what you want? To have her wake as a creature that must feed on human blood to survive, that will watch everyone she knows age and die while she remains unchanged, trapped in an existence that is neither living nor truly being. Eleanor's legs threatened to give out. She grasped the back of a nearby chair, dust rising under her fingers. Transformation? You mean Catherine is becoming a vampire? The process has begun, Nathaniel confirmed, his tone gentler now. Marcus's bite was not meant to kill immediately, but to convert. It is a slow transformation, taking 3 days under normal circumstances. By the third night, when the moon rises full, the change will complete. She will die as a human and wake as something else entirely. No. Eleanor shook her head violently. No, there must be a way to stop it. You said it yourself. You have control, you have age and knowledge. You must know how to reverse this. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, and Eleanor watched emotions flicker across his face, doubt, longing, fear, and something else she could not identify. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. There is one way, but it requires a willing sacrifice of life force given freely and completely. The transformation can be halted if someone offers their vitality in place of what Marcus took. But understand this, such a sacrifice is not partial. Whoever gives this gift will not simply die. They will cease completely, their very essence consumed to restore what was stolen. Then take mine, Eleanor said immediately. I told you I came prepared to give my life. Did you hear what I said? Nathaniel's voice rose with frustration. Not just death, but annihilation. No afterlife, no peace, no reunion with your dead husband in whatever heaven you believe awaits. Nothing. You would simply stop existing as though you never were. Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. I heard you perfectly, and my answer remains the same. Catherine is my sister, my only family, the only good thing left in my life. If my existence can purchase hers, then my existence has meaning. Without her, I am already nothing. Nathaniel stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, and Eleanor watched something crack in his ancient armor, some wall he had built around himself over centuries beginning to crumble. You would trade eternity for a few more years of her life. She is mortal. She will age, sicken, and die eventually. Regardless of what you do now, then she will do so as a human, with the chance to love, to marry, to have children, to experience all the joys and sorrows that make life worth living, Eleanor said fiercely. Is that not worth any price? Nathaniel turned away again, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was rough, as though each word cost him dearly. 300 years ago, I had a wife, Margaret. She was everything light and good, and I was a fool who sought immortality because I feared death, feared losing the time we had together. A vampire offered me the dark gift, and I accepted, believing I could then turn Margaret, and we would have eternity together. He paused, his shoulders bowing under the weight of memory. But the transformation did not take with her. Instead, she died in agony, and I became the very thing that murdered her. I have walked this earth for 3 centuries, hating what I am, unable to die, unable to join her, unable to feel anything but the emptiness where my soul used to be. Eleanor's heart clenched with unexpected sympathy. Then you understand, she said softly. You understand what it is to love someone so much that their loss destroys you. Help me prevent that destruction. Help me save Catherine. Nathaniel turned back to her, and she saw tears on his face, tracks of crimson against his pale skin. Blood tears, she realized, because he had no human tears left to shed. If I do this, he said slowly, if I perform this ritual, I will not simply take your life force and give it to your sister. There is another way, one I have never attempted because it requires something I thought I had lost forever. What way? Eleanor asked, hope flaring dangerously in her chest. I can split the burden, Nathaniel said. Take half from you, half from myself. It would save your sister while allowing you to live, though you would be weakened, your lifespan shortened by perhaps a decade. But for me, he hesitated, and Eleanor saw fear in his ancient eyes. For me, it would mean giving up a portion of my immortality. I would begin to age again, slowly, eventually becoming mortal once more. And when mortality returns to one such as me, death follows within years, not centuries. Eleanor's breath caught. You would do that? Give up immortality for a stranger? I would do it because I'm tired, Nathaniel said simply. Tired of existing without living. Tired of watching the world change while I remain frozen. Tired of being alone in this mausoleum, haunted by the memory of what I lost and what I have become. If I do this, if I help you save your sister, perhaps I can finally believe that some part of the man I was still exists. That I am not entirely the monster I have become. Eleanor found herself moving toward him without conscious thought, and when she stood directly before him, she did something that surprised them both. She reached up and touched his face, wiping away one of those blood tears with her thumb. You are not a monster, she said quietly. A monster would not weep. A monster would not hesitate. A monster would not offer to sacrifice 3 centuries of immortality for 2 women he does not know. Nathaniel's hand came up to cover hers, his skin cool but not cold, and for a moment they stood frozen in that tableau, a widow and a vampire, 2 souls damaged by loss, finding an unexpected connection in the darkness of a cursed manor. Then Nathaniel gently pulled her hand away, though he did not immediately release it. We must go to your sister now, he said. The transformation accelerates as the full moon approaches. Tonight will be the 2nd night. By tomorrow eve it will be too late. The ritual must be performed before the 3rd sunset, or nothing can be done. Eleanor nodded, fear and hope tangled so tightly in her chest she could barely breathe. Will it hurt her? No, Nathaniel assured her. She will sleep through it. But you and I, he met her eyes. We will feel everything. The transfer of life force is not gentle. It will feel as though your very soul is being torn apart and redistributed. I warn you now, you can still refuse. You can walk away, mourn your sister, and live a full life unmarred by what I am offering. I will not refuse, Eleanor said firmly. Tell me what I must do. Nathaniel studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once, decisively. Then we go together. But understand this, Eleanor Ashford, once we begin, there is no turning back. Your life and mine will become entangled, bound together by the magic that will save your sister. You will carry a part of me, and I will carry a part of you, for whatever time remains to us both. I understand, Eleanor said, though she did not truly. How could she understand what it meant to be bound to a vampire, to share her essence with a creature 3 centuries old? But none of that mattered weighed against Catherine's life. When do we leave? Now, Nathaniel said, moving toward the door with that preternatural grace that marked him as something other than human. And Eleanor? When we arrive at your cottage, your sister may be frightened of me. She will sense what I am. You must reassure her, make her understand that I mean no harm. Fear can disrupt the ritual, and we cannot afford that. Eleanor followed him out of the manor, into the misty woods, and as they walked side by side through the ancient trees, she found herself stealing glances at this strange being who had agreed to save her sister at such terrible cost to himself. He moved through the forest as though he were part of it, never stumbling, never hesitating, and she struggled to keep pace with his long strides. May I ask you something? Eleanor ventured after they had walked in silence for several minutes. You may ask, Nathaniel replied, not looking at her. I may not answer. Why did you agree, truly? You could have sent me away, could have let Catherine complete her transformation, and avoided all of this. Why help us? Nathaniel was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he would not respond. But finally, as her cottage came into view through the thinning trees, he stopped and turned to her. in the dappled sunlight filtering through the branches. He looked almost human, almost vulnerable, because, he said softly, when you stood in my hall and offered your life for your sisters without hesitation, without condition, I saw Margaret in you. She would have done the same for anyone she loved. And I realized that if I turned you away, if I let your sister die, and you spend the rest of your life drowning in guilt and grief, then Margaret would never forgive me. And perhaps more importantly, I would never forgive myself. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of Eleanor's hair behind her ear. A gesture so tender it made her throat tighten. In 300 years, you are the first person who has made me want to be human again. That is why I agreed. Before Eleanor could respond, before she could process the weight of what he had just said, Nathaniel turned and continued toward the cottage, leaving her to follow with a heart that suddenly beat far too fast and for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Catherine had deteriorated significantly in the hours Eleanor had been gone. When they entered the cottage, they found her thrashing weakly in the bed, her skin now so pale it was almost translucent, the dark veins spreading from her throat like a spider's web across her jaw and down her collarbone. She was muttering incoherently, words that might have been prayers or pleas, and when Eleanor rushed to her side, Catherine's eyes opened, but they were no longer the clear green Eleanor knew. They had darkened to something between amber and crimson. "Eleanor!" Catherine gasped, her hand shooting out to grasp her sister's wrist with surprising strength. "Something is happening to me. I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell your blood. And I am so hungry, so terribly hungry." Her voice broke on a sob. "What is happening to me?" "Hush now, darling," Eleanor soothed, smoothing Catherine's sweat-dampened hair back from her forehead. "I have brought help. He is going to save you." It was only then that Catherine seemed to register Nathaniel's presence in the doorway. Her eyes fixed on him, and a low sound emerged from her throat, half whimper, half growl, that was entirely inhuman. "No," she whispered. "No, Eleanor, get away from him. He is death. He is darkness. I can feel it pouring off him like cold water. Please, please get away." "Catherine, listen to me." Eleanor gripped her sister's hand firmly, forcing Catherine to meet her eyes. "His name is Nathaniel Crane, and yes, he is a vampire. But he is not the one who hurt you. He's going to help us reverse what was done. You must trust me. You must trust him." Catherine's gaze darted between Eleanor and Nathaniel, fear and confusion warring in her changing eyes. "I do not understand. The stories say, the church says, the stories are not always true," Nathaniel said, moving into the room with careful, non-threatening movements. He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to Catherine's eye level. "What was done to you was done by another of my kind, one who has no conscience, no restraint. I'm offering to undo his work, to pull you back from the edge of transformation. But I need your consent. I need you to willingly accept this help, or the ritual will not work." Catherine stared at him, and Eleanor watched her sister struggle with instinct and reason, the human part of her fighting the vampire part that was beginning to emerge. "If you save me," Catherine finally said, her voice trembling, "what price must Eleanor pay?" "I know there is always a price." Nathaniel glanced at Eleanor, a question in his eyes, and Eleanor gave a tiny nod. "Tell her the truth. Your sister and I will both give a portion of our life force to restore what was taken from you," Nathaniel explained. "Eleanor will lose perhaps 10 years from her natural span. I will lose my immortality and begin aging toward mortality once more. These are prices we have agreed to pay." "No." Catherine tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "No, Eleanor, you cannot. I will not allow you to shorten your life for mine. I will not. It is not your decision to make," Eleanor said firmly. "Catherine, you are my sister, my family, the only person I have left in this world. If our positions were reversed, would you not do the same for me?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears, still clear, still human, and she did not answer, but Eleanor saw the truth in her face. Of course she would. They were sisters. They would die for each other without hesitation. "Then let me do this," Eleanor continued, her voice softening. "Let me save you the way you would save me." After a long moment, Catherine nodded weakly. What must I do? Sleep, Nathaniel said gently. The ritual will be performed while you rest. You will feel nothing, and when you wake you will be human once more. The hunger, the changes, all of it will be reversed. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. This is a tincture made from valerian and other herbs. It will give you deep, dreamless sleep. Trust me, you do not want to be conscious for what comes next. Catherine looked at Eleanor one more time, seeking confirmation, and Eleanor nodded. I will be here when you wake. I promise. She helped Catherine sit up enough to drink the tincture, and within moments her sister's eyes drooped. Her breathing evened, and she fell into a sleep so profound she seemed already dead. Come, Nathaniel said to Eleanor, moving to close the curtains, plunging the room into near darkness. We have perhaps 4 hours before sunset. The ritual must begin now. Eleanor watched as Nathaniel arranged the room with practiced efficiency. He moved Catherine's bed to the center of the floor, then directed Eleanor to help him draw symbols around it using ash from the fireplace. Strange, arcane marks that Eleanor did not recognize, but that made her skin prickle with power. He lit candles at precise points, creating a circle of flickering light around the bed, and finally, he gestured for Eleanor to sit on one side of Catherine while he took the other. Give me your hand, Nathaniel instructed. And when Eleanor reached across Catherine's sleeping form, he grasped it firmly, his cool fingers wrapping around hers. What happens now will be painful and frightening, but you must not break contact. If either of us releases the other before the ritual completes, Catherine will die, and we may die with her. Do you understand? Eleanor nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. Nathaniel placed his other hand on Catherine's chest, directly over her heart, and gestured for Eleanor to do the same. The moment Eleanor's palm made contact with her sister's skin, she felt it, a dark, oily wrongness spreading through Catherine's veins like poison. That is Marcus's infection, Nathaniel explained, his eyes closed in concentration. His essence working to transform her. We are going to burn it out using our own life force as fuel. It will resist. It will fight. But we must persevere. He took a deep breath. Though Eleanor realized he did not truly need to breathe, and began to speak in a language she did not know, ancient words that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. At first, nothing happened. Then Eleanor felt warmth building in her palm, where it rested against Catherine's chest, a gentle heat that gradually intensified. The warmth spread up her arm, into her shoulder, across her chest, until it felt as though her entire body was flushing with fever. She wanted to pull away, but she held firm, her hand locked with Nathaniel's, watching his face as he continued the incantation. The warmth became heat, the heat became fire, and suddenly Eleanor was burning from the inside out, her life force being drawn out through her palm in rivers of golden light that she could somehow see despite her closed eyes. She gasped, biting back a scream, and felt Nathaniel's grip tighten in warning. Hold on! Do not let go. Across from her, Nathaniel's face had gone taut with pain, crimson tears streaming from his closed eyes, and Eleanor could see matching silver light pouring from his hand into Catherine. The gold and silver streams met in Catherine's chest, swirling together, battling the darkness that recoiled and writhed like a living thing. The temperature in the room plummeted, then spiked, candle flames jumping and guttering. Eleanor's vision began to fade at the edges. She could feel her strength draining away, years of her life flowing out of her like water through cupped hands. 10 years, Nathaniel had said, but it felt like more, felt like she was giving everything. Her thoughts became confused, fragmented. She saw Thomas standing in the corner of the room, smiling at her, beckoning. She saw her mother dead these 20 years, reaching out with open arms. The desire to let go, to fall into that waiting darkness, became nearly overwhelming, but then she felt it, through the connection of their clasped hands. Through the bond forming between them as their essences mingled in Catherine's body, she felt Nathaniel. She felt his 3 centuries of loneliness, his crushing guilt over Margaret's death, his bone-deep exhaustion with existence. And beneath all of that she felt something else, something he had not spoken aloud. He was giving more than he had promised. He was not just surrendering his immortality. He was pouring his very will to live into Catherine, keeping almost nothing for himself. He intended to die. "No!" Eleanor gasped aloud, her eyes flying open to meet his across Catherine's body. Nathaniel's eyes opened as well, and in them she saw resignation, peace, acceptance. He had made his choice. After 300 years of penance, he was ready to rest, but Eleanor was not ready to let him. With the last reserves of her strength, she redirected the flow, pulling harder from herself, giving more than the ritual required, forcing Nathaniel to take back some of what he was surrendering. He tried to resist, his eyes widening in shock and something that might have been anger, but Eleanor held firm, her will locked with his. "Save Catherine, yes, but live. Both of you live." The room exploded with light, gold and silver entwined so completely they became something new, something radiant and pure. The darkness in Catherine let out a soundless shriek and shattered, fragments dissolving into nothing. The infection burned away completely. Catherine's body arched off the bed, her back bowing, her mouth open in a silent gasp, and then she collapsed. Her skin immediately beginning to flush with healthy color, the dark veins fading, disappearing. Eleanor and Nathaniel were thrown backward by the force of the ritual's completion, their hands finally tearing apart. Eleanor hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, spots dancing before her eyes. She lay there gasping, every muscle in her body screaming, feeling as though she had aged a lifetime in the span of minutes. Across the room, she could hear Nathaniel's ragged breathing, and she turned her head to see him slumped against the wall, his face ashen, blood, actual red blood, not the crimson of vampire tears trickling from his nose. "You fool," he rasped, his voice raw. "You could have killed us all." "But I did not," Eleanor managed, her own voice barely a whisper. "We are alive, all three of us." Nathaniel laughed, a broken sound that might have been a sob. "Yes, alive, damn you, Eleanor Ashford. Damn you for making me want to be." They lay there in the darkness, too exhausted to move, listening to Catherine's steady, healthy breathing. The candles had burned out, and outside, Eleanor could hear rain beginning to fall, gentle and cleansing. She had saved her sister. They had saved her sister. And in doing so, something had shifted between her and Nathaniel. Some connection forged in shared pain and sacrifice that she did not have words for. Eventually, Nathaniel stirred, dragging himself to his feet with visible effort. He made his way to Catherine's bed, checking her pulse, examining her throat. The marks were still there, but faint now, already beginning to heal. "She will wake soon," he said, his voice still rough. "When she does, she will be weak but whole, human. The transformation has been completely reversed." "And you?" Eleanor asked, finally managing to sit up, though the room spun. "What has this done to you?" Nathaniel looked down at his hands, and Eleanor saw they were shaking. "I can feel it already. Time beginning to move for me again. My heart, which has not truly beaten in 3 centuries, starting to remember its rhythm. It will take months, perhaps a year, but I will become mortal. And then..." He did not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. "And then he would die, as all mortals do. How long?" Eleanor asked softly. "How long will you have?" "I do not know," Nathaniel admitted. 5 years, 10? Not enough to atone for 300 years of darkness, but perhaps enough to remember what it means to be human." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Eleanor saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "And what of you?" "You gave more than we agreed. I felt it. You shortened your life by far more than 10 years. Eleanor knew he was right. She could feel the difference in her body, a brittleness that had not been there before, an awareness of her own mortality that sat heavy on her chest. "How much more?" 20 years, perhaps more," Nathaniel said quietly. "You may have only a decade left." The words should have terrified her, but strangely, Eleanor felt only peace. "Then I will make it a good decade," she said simply. "I will watch Catherine live and love. I will see her marry, perhaps have children. I will know that my life had meaning, that my existence mattered. That is more than many people can say." Nathaniel crossed the room and knelt beside her, and before Eleanor realized what he intended, he took her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle and desperate at once, a kiss that tasted of blood and tears, and 300 years of loneliness ending. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotions Eleanor could not name. "I am bound to you now," he said hoarsely. "Through the ritual, through the life force we share, I am tied to you in ways I do not fully understand. I can feel your heartbeat as though it were my own. I can sense your emotions, your pain. And I suspect you can feel mine." Eleanor nodded slowly, because yes, she could feel him, a presence in the back of her mind that had not been there before, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," Nathaniel said, standing and helping her to her feet, "that we face whatever time we have left together, if you will have me. If you can bear to be bound to a creature who has done such terrible things." Eleanor thought of Thomas, dead 2 years now, and the love they had shared. She thought of the life she had expected, widowhood, solitude, slowly fading into old age alone. And she thought of the man before her, who had given up eternity, who had chosen humanity, who looked at her as though she were something precious and miraculous. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like to know you, Nathaniel Crane. Not the vampire you were, but the man you are becoming. I think I would like very much to have you in whatever life remains to me." The smile that broke across Nathaniel's face was beautiful, transforming him from something ancient and terrible into something almost boyish. "Then stay with me," he said. "Bring Catherine when she wakes. Come to the manor. Let me care for you both while you recover from the ritual. Let me—" He hesitated, vulnerability clear in his face. "Let me learn what it means to have a family again." Before Eleanor could answer, Catherine stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips. Both Eleanor and Nathaniel turned to the bed as Catherine's eyes fluttered open, clear, green, completely human. She blinked slowly, focusing on her sister's face, and smiled. "Eleanor," her voice was weak but steady, "and I had the strangest dream. There was darkness and cold and then light, so much light it burned everything away." Her gaze shifted to Nathaniel, and though there was still wariness there, the fear was gone. "You saved me." "We saved you," Nathaniel corrected gently. "Your sister most of all." Catherine reached for Eleanor's hand, and when their fingers intertwined, Eleanor felt the warmth of living flesh, the steady pulse of a beating heart. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tears of relief, of joy, of a grief she had been carrying for 2 years finally beginning to ease. "Rest now," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sleep and regain your strength, and when you wake again, we have much to discuss." Catherine's eyes were already closing, exhaustion claiming her once more, but this time it was natural sleep, healing sleep. Not the dark unconsciousness of transformation. Eleanor sat beside her, holding her hand, and felt Nathaniel's presence at her other side, solid and real and alive in ways he had not been for centuries. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a clear evening sky. Through the cottage window, Eleanor could see stars beginning to emerge, and she thought that perhaps after all the darkness, all the loss, all the pain, there might finally be light ahead. Not the harsh light of day, but something gentler, the soft glow of candlelight, the warmth of human connection, the possibility of love found in the most unexpected of places. She looked at Nathaniel, and he looked back, and in that shared glance was a promise neither of them spoke aloud, but both understood. Whatever time they had left, they would face it together. Not as vampire and victim, not as monster and prey, but as two damaged souls learning to heal in each other's company. It was not the ending Eleanor had expected when she woke that morning. But perhaps, she thought, it was exactly the ending she needed. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm that felt simultaneously foreign and right. Catherine recovered quickly, her strength returning within days. And though she bore faint scars on her throat that would never fully fade, They served as a reminder of how close she had come to losing herself entirely. True to his word, Nathaniel had invited them to the manor, and after much discussion and some understandable reluctance on Catherine's part, they had accepted. The Haverford estate, which had seemed so ominous that first morning Eleanor approached it, gradually revealed itself to be not a tomb, but a time capsule. Under the dust and cobwebs lay beauty, intricate wood carvings, stained glass windows that threw rainbows across the floors when the sun hit them just right, a library containing thousands of books spanning centuries. Nathaniel had opened the manor to them completely, holding nothing back, and slowly, room by room, they brought life back to the forgotten halls. Eleanor found herself spending long hours in the library with Nathaniel, who proved to be unexpectedly easy to talk to once the initial strangeness wore off. He told her stories of the centuries he had lived through, of historical events he had witnessed firsthand, of the slow, agonizing process of watching the world change while he remained frozen outside of time. And she told him of her own life, her childhood in Ashbourne, her marriage to Thomas, the 6 months of watching her husband die by inches, and the 2 years of grief that followed. "Do you still love him?" Nathaniel asked one evening as they sat before the library fire, rain pattering against the windows. The question was not jealous or confrontational, merely curious, and Eleanor appreciated his directness. "I will always love Thomas," Eleanor said honestly, staring into the flames. "He was my first love, my husband, the man I thought I would grow old beside. But loving him does not mean I am incapable of loving again, or that my heart died with him." She turned to look at Nathaniel, finding him watching her with that intense gaze that no longer frightened her. "I think Thomas would want me to be happy. He would not want me to spend whatever years I have left mourning what I lost, instead of embracing what I might still find." Nathaniel reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, his fingers warm now, no longer the cool touch of undeath. Each day he became more human. His heart beat stronger, his skin flushed with color, his body temperature rising. The transformation was not without pain. Some mornings he woke gasping, disoriented by dreams he had not experienced in 3 centuries. And twice Eleanor had found him in the kitchen at dawn, marveling at the simple fact that he was hungry for actual food. He courted her properly, as a gentleman from his era would have done, with long walks through the winter gardens, evenings spent reading poetry aloud, stolen kisses in shadowed corners. But there was always a shadow over their happiness, an awareness of time running out. Eleanor could feel her own vitality waning. She tired more easily now, her bones ached on cold mornings, and strands of grey had appeared in her hair seemingly overnight. And Nathaniel, despite becoming more human daily, was not growing healthier. He was aging, yes, but in reverse somehow, his body trying to compress 3 centuries of mortality into a handful of years. One evening in late December, as snow fell softly outside, Eleanor found Nathaniel in Margaret's portrait room, standing before the painting with an expression of such profound sadness that she almost retreated. But he had heard her footsteps, and he held out his hand without turning. "I am saying goodbye," he said quietly, as Eleanor joined him. "Truly goodbye, not the holding on I have been doing for 300 years. Eleanor studied the portrait. Margaret had been lovely, there was no denying it, with an openness in her painted eyes that suggested innocence and joy. "She looks kind." "She was," Nathaniel said. "She was everything good in the world. And I destroyed her because I was too afraid to lose her. Too selfish to accept that love sometimes means letting go." He finally turned to Eleanor, and she saw acceptance in his face, peace she had not seen before. "I loved her. I will always love her. But I am not the man she loved anymore. That man died when she did. I'm someone new now, someone different, shaped by 3 centuries of darkness, and then by you, by your courage, your sacrifice, your stubborn refusal to let me die when I was ready to." "Nathaniel," Eleanor began, but he pressed his fingers gently to her lips. "Let me finish, please." He took a breath, that still new habit of breathing he was relearning. "I am in love with you, Eleanor Ashford. Not the ghost of Margaret, not a replacement for what I lost, but you, your strength, your kindness, the way you look at the world as though it still has beauty despite all the pain you have endured. I know we do not have much time. I can feel my body failing, can sense death approaching in a way I have not felt since I was human the first time. But whatever time remains, whether it is months or years, I want to spend it with you. As your husband, if you will have me." Eleanor's breath caught. Marriage. She had not dared to hope, had not let herself imagine a future that defined, because the future itself was so uncertain. "I am not Margaret," she said, needing him to understand. "I will never be her." "I know," Nathaniel said, cupping her face in his warm, living hands. "I do not want you to be. I want you to be exactly who you are. The woman who walked into my darkness and pulled me back into the light. The woman who gave up 20 years of her life to save her sister. The woman who taught me that 300 years of existence means nothing compared to a single moment of truly living." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "Yeah," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you. For whatever time we have, yes." Nathaniel kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Eleanor tasted salt, her tears or his, she could not tell, and it did not matter. They were bound already, had been since the night of the ritual, but this was different. This was choice, not necessity. This was love, not sacrifice. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in the manor's restored chapel, with Catherine as their only witness, and the village priest who asked no questions about the groom's unusual pallor or the bride's premature aging. Eleanor wore a dress of deep blue velvet that had belonged to Nathaniel's mother, altered to fit by Catherine's skilled hands, and Nathaniel wore clothes from his own era, looking like a gentleman stepped out of time. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor felt the bond between them, that strange, magical connection, solidify into something unbreakable. She could feel Nathaniel's heartbeat as though it were her own, could sense his emotions, his love, his fear, his desperate hope that they might have more time than either of them believed possible. Their wedding night was tender and fierce at once, both of them aware that every moment was precious. That time was a luxury they could not afford to waste. Nathaniel made love to her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, his touch worshipful, and Eleanor gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. This was not the fumbling passion of youth, but something deeper, the joining of two souls who had found each other in the twilight of their lives and chosen to burn bright rather than fade quietly. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the massive bed that had once been his and Margaret's, Eleanor traced the lines of Nathaniel's face, memorizing every detail. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "Not a single one," Nathaniel said, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "If I had known that giving up immortality would lead me to you, I would have done it centuries ago." "Liar," Eleanor said fondly. "You would have terrified me. I needed to be ready for you, and you needed to be ready for humanity again. Perhaps you are right." Nathaniel pulled her closer, tucking her head beneath his chin. "Eleanor, whatever happens, when my body gives out, when the mortality I have reclaimed catches up with me, I want you to know that these months with you have been worth everything. Worth 300 years of loneliness, worth the loss of immortality, worth whatever pain comes next. You have given me something I thought I would never have again. You have given me a reason to be grateful for being alive." Eleanor's throat tightened. She could feel it in him now, the growing weakness, the way his heart struggled to maintain its rhythm. The ritual had saved Catherine completely, but it had not given Nathaniel true human health. It had simply made him mortal enough to die. "How long?" she whispered. She felt him tense, felt his reluctance to voice what they both knew. "Weeks, perhaps. A month, if I am fortunate. My body is trying to age 3 centuries in a year, Eleanor. It cannot sustain that. Eventually it will simply stop." "No!" Eleanor pushed herself up to look at him, fierce determination blazing in her chest. "No, that is not acceptable. There must be something we can do, some way to stabilize you. Eleanor, love, there is nothing. Then I will give you more, Eleanor said desperately. We shared life force once. We can do it again. Take mine, take whatever you need. Absolutely not. Nathaniel sat up as well, gripping her shoulders. You have already given too much. You have already shortened your life by decades. I will not take more from you. Then what am I supposed to do? Eleanor's voice broke. Watch you die? Lose you the same way I lost Thomas? How is that fair, Nathaniel? How is any of this fair? Nathaniel pulled her against his chest, and Eleanor felt his heart racing, felt his own fear and grief through their bond. It is not fair, he admitted quietly. Nothing about this is fair. But Eleanor, my darling, at least we had this. At least we found each other. Some people live entire lifetimes without experiencing what we have shared in these few months. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of finding love, only to have it ripped away. But she could not speak, past the tears choking her. She clung to Nathaniel, feeling his warmth, his solidity, trying to memorize the feeling of his arms around her, knowing that memory would have to sustain her through all the years to come. They spent the following weeks in a desperate kind of happiness, cramming as much living as possible into the time remaining. Nathaniel taught Eleanor to dance the old ways, waltzing through the manor's ballroom to music only they could hear. They read to each other for hours, worked together in the gardens, planning spring plantings Nathaniel would never see, made love with increasing urgency as his strength waned. Catherine watched them with eyes full of sorrow and understanding. And Eleanor knew her sister blamed herself, knew Catherine carried guilt that her salvation had come at such cost. But Eleanor could not regret it. She would make the same choice again, would pay the same price, because Catherine was alive and human and whole, and that was worth everything. The end came on a February morning when winter was just beginning to loosen its grip. Eleanor woke to find Nathaniel still beside her, which had become unusual. Most mornings he woke before dawn, unable to sleep, his body too uncomfortable. But this morning he lay very still, his breathing shallow, his skin pale as parchment. Nathaniel, Eleanor touched his face, and his eyes opened, though they seemed to look through her rather than at her. Eleanor, he whispered, and she had to lean close to hear him. My love, it is time. No, Eleanor's voice was fierce. Not yet. Please, not yet. I'm sorry, Nathaniel said, and she felt through their bond that he was sorry for leaving her, sorry for the pain his death would cause, sorry that their time together had been so brief. I wish we had more time. We do, Eleanor insisted, though she could feel the lie in the words. We have today. We have now. Stay with me, Nathaniel. Please stay. Always, Nathaniel promised, his hand finding hers, his grip weak but warm. Even when I am gone, I will be with you. Through the bond, through your memories, through every beat of your heart. I will never truly leave you. Catherine came then, summoned by some instinct, and she took Nathaniel's other hand. Thank you, she said simply, for saving me, for loving my sister, for showing us that monsters can become men, and that love can be found even in the darkest places. Nathaniel smiled, and in that smile Eleanor saw the man he had been before the darkness, the man who had loved Margaret, the man who had learned to love again. Take care of each other, he said. Promise me. We promise, Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her face. Eleanor could not speak. She held Nathaniel's hand and felt his heartbeat slowing through their bond, felt his life force ebbing like a tide going out. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand more time, but she knew it would do no good. Death, having been patient for 3 centuries, had come to collect what was owed. I love you, Eleanor finally managed, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. I will always love you, and I you, Nathaniel breathed. His eyes fixed on hers, and she saw peace there and gratitude, and a love so profound it made her chest ache. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for teaching me how to live again. His eyes closed. His chest rose one final time, then fell and did not rise again. And Eleanor felt it through their bond, the moment his heart stopped, the moment his spirit left his body, The moment the connection between them stretched thin and then broke, leaving a hollow ache where his presence had been. She did not cry out. She simply held his hand and bowed her head over their joined fingers, feeling a grief so immense it seemed impossible that her body could contain it. Catherine wrapped her arms around Eleanor from behind, and the two sisters sat there as dawn broke outside the windows, as sunlight streamed into the room where a reformed vampire had finally found peace, and as a widow, twice a widow now, began the slow, painful process of learning how to live with a broken heart. 3 years passed in the manor, and Eleanor discovered that grief, while it never truly left, could transform. The sharp, unbearable pain of those first months softened gradually into a dull ache that she carried like a stone in her chest. She learned to live around it, to function despite it, to find small moments of peace even when the weight of loss pressed heavy on her shoulders. Catherine remained with her, refusing Eleanor's suggestion that she return to the village, find a young man, start the life she deserved. "You are my family," Catherine said firmly, "and this is my home now. I am not leaving you alone in this great empty house." But the house was not entirely empty. They kept Nathaniel's presence alive in small ways, his books arranged as he had left them, his favorite chair by the library fire left unoccupied, the gardens maintained according to the plans they had made together. Eleanor slept in their bed still, and some nights she swore she could feel him beside her, could sense his warmth through the bond that death had not completely severed. She aged rapidly, the years she had given up catching up with her all at once. Her hair turned silver, her face lined with wrinkles that had not been there a year before, and her body grew frail. The village doctor, when Catherine finally insisted on calling him, pronounced her condition unusual but not unnatural, simply a body wearing out far faster than expected. "You have perhaps a year," he told Catherine quietly, not knowing Eleanor could hear from the next room. "Maybe less. Her heart is weakening, and there is nothing to be done. Make her comfortable. Let her rest." But Eleanor did not want rest. She wanted to live, to honor both Thomas's memory and Nathaniel's sacrifice by squeezing every drop of life from whatever time remained. She wrote her memoirs, documenting her extraordinary story, though she changed names and details, not wanting to bring trouble to Catherine or tarnish what she and Nathaniel had shared. She painted, discovering a talent she had never known she possessed. She taught Catherine everything she knew about managing the estate, about the investments Nathaniel had left them, about how to live independently in a world that did not value independent women, and she waited with patience, learned from loss, for death to come and reunite her with the two men she had loved. Spring arrived in its own time, as it always did, bringing warmth and renewal to the manor grounds. The gardens that Eleanor and Nathaniel had planned together burst into bloom, roses and lavender and sweet William, a riot of colour that made Eleanor's heart ache with bittersweet joy. She spent hours sitting among the flowers in the wheeled chair Catherine had procured when walking became too difficult, letting the sun warm her face, listening to birdsong, feeling grateful for simple beauty. It was on one such morning, with bees humming among the roses and the air sweet with spring scent, that Eleanor felt the change, a sudden lightness in her chest, as though some great weight had lifted, a sense of presence, familiar and beloved, that she had not felt since the morning Nathaniel died. She opened her eyes, she did not remember closing them, and found she was no longer sitting in her chair, but standing in the garden path, her body young and strong and whole. Confused, she looked down at her hands and saw smooth skin, no age spots, no trembling. She touched her face and felt firm flesh, no wrinkles, no sag of time. "Hello, my love," Eleanor spun, and there he was. Nathaniel, standing at the edge of the garden where shadow met sunlight, looking exactly as he had the first night she met him, beautiful and dangerous and impossibly alive. Except now she understood. Not alive. Neither of them were alive anymore. "I died," Eleanor said, the words more statement than question. "Very peacefully," Nathaniel confirmed, moving toward her with that preternatural grace she remembered. Catherine was with you. She held your hand, told you she loved you, and let you go. It was a good death, Eleanor, easy, no pain. Eleanor looked back toward her chair and saw herself still sitting there, head tilted back, eyes closed, a slight smile on her lined face. Catherine knelt beside the chair, holding a hand that Eleanor no longer inhabited, tears streaming down her face, but no panic, no shock. Her sister had known this was coming, had been prepared, and now she was saying goodbye with the kind of grace that came from having already lost so much. "I should feel something," Eleanor said slowly. "Sadness, fear, but I just feel light." "That is death," Nathaniel said, reaching her now, his hands framing her face as they had so many times before. The letting go of all the heavy things. The release from pain and time and worry. He smiled, and it was radiant with joy. "I have been waiting for you, my darling. 3 years I have waited, and finally you have come home to me. This is real." Eleanor breathed, hardly daring to believe. "You are real? This is not just my dying mind creating comfort?" "I am real," Nathaniel assured her. "And this—" He gestured around them, and Eleanor saw that the garden was somehow more vivid than it had been moments before, the colors richer, the air clearer. "This is what comes after. Not heaven or hell, but something in between. A place where souls like ours, bound by sacrifice and love, can finally rest together." Eleanor threw her arms around him, and he was solid, warm, whole. She felt tears on her face, her own or his, she could not tell. And then he was kissing her, and it was like coming home after a long journey. Every atom of her being sang with rightness, with completion, with joy so profound, it felt like it might shatter her into light. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor looked back once more at the garden, at Catherine still kneeling beside her body. "She will be all right?" she asked, needing reassurance. "She will grieve," Nathaniel said gently, "but she will also live. She will marry in 2 years, a good man, a kind man who will love her fiercely. She will have 3 children and live to be 82 years old. She will name her first daughter Eleanor, and she will tell all her children and grandchildren about the extraordinary woman who saved her life. Though she will change the details enough that no one will believe vampires were involved." He smiled. "Your story will be passed down through generations as a fairy tale, a legend of love and sacrifice. And perhaps in time someone will read the memoirs you wrote and understand that the fairy tale was true." Eleanor felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Catherine would be all right, more than all right. She would live the life Eleanor had saved for her, full and long and happy. "Thank you for telling me. There is someone else who wants to see you," Nathaniel said, and he stepped aside, gesturing to a figure approaching through the garden. Eleanor's heart stuttered, and she still had a heart here. She realized, or at least the memory of one, because walking toward her, looking exactly as he had on their wedding day, was Thomas. "Hello, Eleanor," her first husband said, his voice warm and familiar and beloved. "I have been watching over you, you know. These past 5 years, I have watched you grieve and live and love again. And I have been so proud of you." Eleanor looked between Thomas and Nathaniel, confusion and something like guilt warring in her chest. "I do not understand. How can you both be here? How can I love you both?" "Because love does not diminish when it is shared," Thomas said gently, coming to stand on her other side. "I loved you, Eleanor. I still love you. And I am grateful to Nathaniel for being there when I could not, for giving you a reason to keep living when grief might have destroyed you." He turned to Nathaniel, extending his hand. "Thank you for loving her. Thank you for teaching her to love again." Nathaniel took Thomas's hand, and Eleanor saw understanding pass between the 2 men who had loved her. "She saved me," Nathaniel said simply. "In every way a person can be saved." "Then we are both indebted to her," Thomas said with a smile. "And perhaps in this place we need not choose. Perhaps here love can exist without jealousy or limitation. Perhaps we can all simply be together for whatever eternity looks like." Eleanor felt something shift, some final piece falling into place. She took both their hands, Thomas on her left, Nathaniel on her right, and felt complete in a way she never had in life. This was not choosing between them, not replacing one with the other, but having both, holding the love she had shared with each and letting those loves coexist without conflict. "Is this heaven?" she asked, looking at the garden, the manor beyond it, the endless golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I like to think it is our heaven," Nathaniel said, "built from the memories and loves we carry, a place where the three of us can finally rest, finally be at peace, finally just be, in the physical world." Catherine was standing now, covering Eleanor's body with a soft blanket, pressing a kiss to her sister's cold forehead. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, "for everything. For saving me, for loving me, for teaching me to be strong. I will miss you every day, but I will live the life you gave me. I promise." Eleanor felt those words like a benediction, like permission to let go fully. She squeezed the hands she held and turned away from the world of flesh and blood and grief, turning instead toward the light, toward peace, toward an eternity in the company of the two men who had loved her and whom she had loved in return. They walked together into that light, three souls bound by love and sacrifice and loss, and as they faded from the garden, a single white rose bloomed where they had stood, a rose that had not been planted, that should not exist in that spot, but that Catherine would find the next morning and recognize immediately as a gift, a message, a promise that love endures even beyond death. Catherine knelt beside the rose, touching its petals gently, and though she could not see them, she could feel them, Eleanor, Nathaniel, and Thomas, together finally, at peace finally, watching over her with love. "Thank you," she whispered again, not sure who she was thanking, her sister, the vampire who had saved her, the God she had always believed in, or perhaps all of them. Then she stood, straightened her shoulders, and walked back to the manor with her head held high. She had a life to live after all, a life her sister had died twice to give her, and she would not waste a single moment of it. Years later, when Catherine was old and surrounded by her children and grandchildren, she would tell them the story one final time. The story of a widow who walked into darkness to save her sister, of a vampire who gave up immortality for love, of a husband who blessed his wife's second chance at happiness, and of three souls who found each other across the boundaries of life and death. Is it true? Her youngest granddaughter would ask, eyes wide with wonder. Catherine would smile and touch the locket around her neck, the one containing a pressed white rose that had never faded, never wilted, that remained as fresh as the day it had mysteriously appeared 40 years earlier. "Every word," she would say, "every single word, and in that place between worlds, in that garden of eternal spring, three souls would feel those words and smile, knowing that love, real love, the kind that sacrifices everything and demands nothing, never truly dies. It simply waits, patient and eternal, for all those it touches to come home.